Hey everyone, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor for Water and Waste Digest. Today I have with me Ty Vanden Akker. Sorry, he is Vice President of Product Strategy for Locana, and we're going to talk about GIS systems and how utilities can use them for improved operations, asset management, and maybe even capital planning. So Ty, thank you so much for being here. We are just so delighted to have you today.
Thanks. I'm thrilled to be here.
So I want to start kind of higher level here. Let's get an understanding of like the framework with which we're going to be talking about things today, GIS being what it is. But so for those unfamiliar, can you explain what GIS is so we have that foundational knowledge? And prior to this call, you were talking about how that's evolving still even now, talking about different terminology like location intelligence and whatnot. So could you elaborate on how that's evolving as well?
Yeah, happy to, Bob. Thank you. So GIS stands for Geographic Information System. There's lots of other acronyms that float around the industry, but Geographic Information System is the proper one. Um, it has, as you alluded to, started to evolve. We're talking a lot more now about location intelligence, geolocation, geo-enabling things, and that speaks to how this is growing. GIS often has been associated with some of the engineering or sciences kind of disciplines, and as you know from trying to get a car in a busy city, your location is really important to get that Uber there, and it's amazing how fast you can get a car as they match up people driving around to people requesting them. So we're really taking location and integrating it with other things and bringing it to bear to solve the world's biggest problems. And that's part of this change. But we're very familiar with the scientific, technical GIS capabilities. Locana started life 20 years ago as part of CH2M Hill that I know many of your readers will be familiar with as a big wastewater engineering firm. We became an independent company, and then just a couple of weeks ago rebranded in an effort to really emphasize the importance of how location is starting to permeate all of our society and its capability to really change the way we do things in the world in a really positive way. So we're excited about that piece of it. There's a couple of things I think that are important about GIS that some people aren't familiar with. One is that, first of all, it's an electronic system. Second of all, it's not just keeping track of the location of things, but it actually also tracks a whole bunch of details of things. So if you've got a water main in the ground, it's not just where is that main, but it's what's its ID, what kind of material is it, when was it installed, how deep is it, all those other kinds of things that are really, really useful to know and have at your fingertips. But it's not just assets either. It's where am I? Where am I in relation to that piece of infrastructure? Where are environmentally sensitive areas? Where do I need to be really careful from that standpoint? Or where do my crew need to be really careful because there's other hazards in the area, or they may jeopardize vulnerable populations. So that's a really important thing about where things are. And then we take it really to another level. We talk about analyzing the data. And that's really where the electronic piece of this information system takes off, because we can say, not only where is this thing, but how close is it to something else that's relevant? How close is it to something that's dangerous? We can start to understand patterns and relationships in geographic context. And then more and more, we're talking about connecting it to the other information systems. So we don't just know what our inventory is, we know where our inventory is. We know that this asset right here is being depreciated at a certain rate. We know that this asset right here has a certain failure pattern, and we can start to look at those things. So it really goes well beyond just kind of a map of things or where are things to a system that helps us to be smart about what we're doing and where we're doing it.
Yeah, man, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about so many different useful ways that this could be used, and I think oftentimes when I think about like types of infrastructure and asset management, the first thing, especially now that I think about, is the lead and copper rule revisions and like identifying pipe and logging it and making sure you know where all of that is. This could be very useful in that case of logging that information and having an actual map system of what type of pipe is where, so then you can capital plan where are replacements happening, where is this happening, all of that, all crucial elements that have to be complied with for the lead and copper rule. So, um,
Yeah.
Anyway, um,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, well, that's a huge one, and it really speaks to some of the integration and the ways that we go about doing things. I talked about solving some of the world's most pressing problems with location, and safe drinking water is one of those. Whether that's a village that doesn't have access to water systems at all, or whether that's right here in the United States. We all remember an incident several years ago in Michigan. Where there were some pretty serious problems. And GIS is really a way to help do that, not only because we know where things are, we track where those things are, but also because we're able to bring in, for example, demographic information. We're able to bring in hazard information. And so when you bring GIS into that mix, it allows you not only to say, look, I'm going down my list of inventory, but also to say, I have a sensible program to do that. You have a way of demonstrating that you're making progress. And you can do that planning in a way that optimizes public value, utility value, and then you can demonstrate to regulators that it's demographically equitable, that it is in fact happening. You can quantify your progress. So that I appreciate you bringing up that example. It's a great one in terms of where GIS can help and help in more ways than just kind of knowing where stuff is.
Yeah. Oh, the demographic thing, I recognize that as well. I had heard about how um review like overlaying your data with this demographic information can help you understand why, for example, maybe it's hard for people to pay for a bill in one area of your city. Maybe you're like, why is no one paying? Why are these people not paying? And then you look at the demographic data and it's all centered around one spot that is cut off by a highway. Like you can
Yeah.
find all of these small details that make such a big difference. And you're like, oh, let's make sure that we have an easier way for them to pay their bill.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress from that. I want to talk a little bit more about GIS and stuff like that. We could go on forever. What do you see as kind of like the biggest barriers, I guess, to getting this implemented for utilities? Obviously, there's a ton of really small utilities out there that make up the majority of the utilities in the United States. What are the barriers to having them get this type of product up and running?
Sure. There's some standard ones. We think about cost and other things. I think it's worth highlighting that a healthy sense of caution is one of them.
Mm,
We recognize the criticality of the infrastructure and the service that's provided. Nobody wants to make a mistake there. The good news is that GIS technologies have evolved and have been around for now a very long time. They are very reliable. The accuracy can be recorded down to anything that you can capture with a survey. So to a large extent, that's gone. But of course, we always need to be able to manage that effectively for it to still be reliable and safe. Inertia is certainly one of those. We're used to things the way they are, and we've got staff that are accustomed with that. And so that also tends to drive this question of, okay, what's our ROI for implementing it?
mhm,
And that can be a difficult question because you go down and you try and look at any one of these things where GIS is going to benefit you. And sometimes it's hard to say, well, that one justifies the cost. I like to think about it as a little bit similar to the people that don't have a cell phone, or maybe they're still carrying a flip phone. I I'm very ROI centric. I can't I can't give you a good list of why I have a smartphone, but I know that I need one. I know how I use it every day, and I know that it fundamentally makes my life different and mostly in good ways. And I think GIS is a little bit similar to that. We use maybe a more professional term. The enterprise is the killer app. It's the combination of all the benefits and how it fundamentally changes those business operations. Um, so I think some of those are the key things that stop people. Esri's huge in municipal water, as you know. They've taken big strides to try and make things affordable
mhm.
to municipal utilities to help encourage that adoption as well. So things are certainly changing and continue to change and become more acceptable, more easy for smaller utilities to adopt.
Yeah, I feel like I talk about this all the time that like these types of technologies are arguably most important for those small utilities that are short staffed and short on time, because they improve operations to a degree that makes their lives a lot easier. But it's hard, like you said, the capital element is hard to do. It's hard to get their time to implement it and stuff like that too. There's a lot of these like smaller barriers that make a challenge, but the benefits are so totally worth it, it seems like.
Yeah. Yep. No, you got it right.
So, what way, speaking of the benefits, I mean, you mentioned like business operations and stuff like that. Could you talk about some of the ways that you've seen water and wastewater utilities use GIS to improve their operations?
Yeah, and I guess we already dove into maybe one example with the lead copper rule and how that might apply. So there's one good one. Some really simpler ones are looking at things like your asset inventory and having your location data and your engineering data, having it there together. Locana has a product called Lemur that's designed specifically to push that out into the field so that your field workers have ready access to that and are able to connect that up with their work management systems. We've got one customer right now who's using that to track the locations of main breaks. And as we put that project and that solution together for them, they had an objective of reducing the cost of main breaks by 20% by tracking where those breaks were happening and factoring that data into their capital replacement programs. So that's a little bit of a unified view of how that comes together. There's modeling improvements that you can see from GIS. There are a number of different water models that can be applied to a GIS system to help manage that system more effectively. That's going to you combine that really too with leak mitigation, and you start to reduce the cost of operating the pumps and other things, minimizing loss, especially in areas. I know you had a guest recently talking about water scarcity. Even in the United States, we used to talk a lot about the commodity being low to no value, and the cost and the delivery infrastructure being the strong piece, and that's starting to change. So GIS also starts to open the doors to managing a loss of the commodity, especially when you bring IoT in. You're looking at pressures, you're looking at pump utilization and rates. So there's just more things than you can count. I think one of the things that's really exciting to me is this ability, and this is part of Locana's focus on where are we going and how does this actually start to fundamentally change things. But we used to talk a lot about silos, and I just don't talk about silos anymore. All the IT systems are really opening up to where there's integration. So now it's become so much easier to take location data and connect it up with your finance information, to connect it up with your engineering or your operations and your work and people management systems. So there's some really exciting opportunities there to know where people are, to dispatch them quickly, minimizing windshield time, keep your gas usage down, all those kinds of things as well. So we're really excited about the opportunities there. And we see some of those, in fact, we see a lot of those happening in some of the gas utilities that are larger gas utilities. In many ways similar to water utilities, in other ways very different. But somewhat of a leading indicator in some cases, because you've got that very large scale where they've got big problems, big dollars, and big dollars to solve them.
Yeah, we had talked kind of before the call that there are potentially some lessons to learn from those gas utilities that apply to the water and wastewater space. Are there certain elements of what they're doing that you think could inform and help almost give a glide path or a roadmap for water utilities to implement GIS?
There are, and that capital planning is a huge one. The place where we work a lot with them is on their field forces, where they're out doing inspections. They're proactively looking for problems. They're replacing assets. They're recording updates and collecting, just as they're out in the field, collecting information on where those assets are. If they need to go shut off water, they need to shut off gas in the middle of the winter and it's under 1.5 feet of ice. You want to know pretty close where it is, because it's not that easy to dig through that ice. So that's one of the things that they're doing is that our Lemur application is providing them a really easy way to say, first of all, we've got this GIS map in our hands, and second, that valve, the company thinks the valve is here. Really, it's about 10 feet west of there. And they're just going to submit a recommendation that says, hey, this is actually over here. It's going to go back and get validated by somebody, but they're able to collect that while they're out in the field. And that's a very efficient and effective way to do that compared to sending out a survey team to go and try and capture, perfect locations of all those valves, for example.
Yeah. Oh, it just expense wise,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
too, you
Yeah.
know. Well, like,
Yeah.
we talked at the top, kind of this evolution of GIS and location intelligence and stuff like that. Where do you see the future going? Like, how do you see the more advanced utility users of GIS moving forward? What do you see them doing, and how do you see them implementing all these new things that we're talking about into their systems to tell better stories and communicate with their customers better, and also improve operations?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. There's a term called digital twin that really speaks to having an electronic model and record of all of your data. And GIS is a key piece of that because you know where it is, how far apart it is, where it is relative to your customers, relative to your sources, and other things. So a digital twin is a big one. You start to integrate that and connect it with things like IoT. You're seeing how your network is performing more in real time. And one of the things that I love about GIS, I know we've had SCADA and things for a long time that have provided some real-time information, but GIS is really providing the ability to distribute that information very widely, way beyond engineers, way outside of the control room. We're pushing it out to field workers, and so they're able to go out to a customer, and they're able to see not only what's going on there, but what's going on the street or other things that might be connected to the same piece of that distribution network, and make those comparisons and see what the real-time performance of things is. It helps them troubleshoot much more quickly, restore service to a customer much more quickly. So it's a great thing, including some of the demographic and environmental information. I think it's a time where we're starting to go and have the ability and need to go way beyond just, what's my asset and is it working right? There's a transformation, I believe, is starting to happen in the utility industry from being very asset and delivery focused to being customer focused. It's a subtle change, but an important one. And having that information about customers, demographics, environmental information, we start to look in other utilities, and we're seeing distributed generation of electric, for example. Those kinds of things all come together. And I think what we're seeing as we roll all that up is this broad human global perspective that GIS can provide. We're a company that fundamentally believes that location intelligence has the ability to solve some of the world's greatest problems. And some of them are like lead and copper, and making sure that we've got safe drinking water for everybody, that we're taking the cost of delivering those things down, and really serving kind of this global human good in the process of doing it.
Yeah, wow. Your point about utilities being more customer centric is 100% true. I've recognized this shift in it's kind of like the framing of conversations about certain things, about how is this better for our customer? How is this better for the public that is using our water or wastewater system? And having this type of mapping and whatnot, and being able to be transparent with that, is something that frankly couldn't have happened so much 10 years ago for a lot of these utilities. So it creates a whole new avenue to be more transparent with customers. Transparency being what I consider to be one of the most important aspects of this lead and copper rule stuff as well, because someone's going to be at the front of the line, someone's going to be at the end of it, and you need to explain why, and how your resources are being used as effectively as possible to solve your problems. So
Yeah,
this can
yeah.
help. This could be a tool that so totally helps you there.
Yeah, that's right. It really does give you the ability to provide that insight. And we talked a lot about how you work within the organization, how you work with field workers. But to your point, customers, regulators, all of them have the ability to consume some of that data, and obviously some of that data you're not going to share publicly because it's critical infrastructure. Others you can, and you can say you can allow customers to interact with you in a more meaningful way through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Ty. I really appreciate your time today, and this is a really fun conversation. I haven't gotten to dive this deep into GIS in so long, so it's really cool to see how things are evolving, where you guys are trying to take things, and what the future is for this type of technology. So, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. I feel like I could talk about it all day, but you did a great job of sort of honing in on some of the key things for for your audience and recognizing that they're across the spectrum. I think hopefully we covered some of those things. That how do you get started, and some of them of look where might you be going. And
Hmm.
I guess my encouragement would just be take the next step.
Hmm.
There are great things happening. Think outside of just the traditional siloed disciplines and start to pull things together, and you'll be amazed at what's possible. And some of those things you can really quantify with ROI, like the customer that's doing the water main breaks, and really reducing the cost of some of those delivered by just being a little bit smarter about how you do things because you've got data on it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks once more. And check out the video description. If you're watching this and you're interested, check out our video description. We'll have some links down there that you can check out. You can learn a little bit more about Locana and some of the things they got going on. So thanks again, Ty.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob.